Kerwin, thank you so much for setting aside time to talk to me. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the purpose of this conversation and the video series before we jump right in. So really the underlying theme here is the next stage and the hopeful evolution of DEI. When it comes to DEI, there are some people who are calling it a little bit of a passing fad, but I feel like you would agree with me that folks in global mobility know that it's actually core to the global mobility industry, and it's core to successfully bringing together people from different backgrounds. And so what I really want to get into in today's conversation is what you personally feel the responsibility is of the global mobility industry to take DEI principles to the next level, being that DEI is really a core component of the industry itself. So I'm really looking forward to a conversation with you, and I wanted to start by asking you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Hiba. Nice to be here. Again, very grateful for the opportunity. In terms of, currently job one is with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I'm the global head of HR compliance, and I've been in the role for exactly a year. Prior to that, I was running, I was in the role of global head of employee mobility for about 7, 8 years. And then prior to that, I was running talent acquisition for Asia for an equivalent about 7 years as well. All of those spent with HP, and then prior to that, 13 years at Intel, doing all sorts of HR roles, setting up shared services, doing outsourcing, basically leading change, delivering change across the highest priority initiatives of HR across the region. Thank you.
So I will tell you that it was, I think, around 2021 when I attended an event in which I heard you share parts of your life story. And your story has resonated with me and it's stayed with me in the last few years. And that was why it was really important to me to be able to talk to you as part of the inaugural episode of this WERC limited series. And I was wondering if you would be able to share parts of your story as well in terms of just, how things started for you and how you found yourself in this role.
Well, if I could take a few steps before that, again, mobility is, and the value of the why of mobility is very personal to me. Mobility for me is a vehicle that allows us to, again, if done well, if done right, allows us to change the trajectory of our career, professionally. And for the most part, it allows us to change, our lives for the better. And I've been the direct beneficiary of that. Mobility and my life story has been, entwined across multiple generations. My grandparents exited China at the time when China was going through some difficult times. They escaped China, went to Manila in search of just a better life, and for them, better life was selling eggs. That's their business. And then, of course, my parents, my dad was born in Manila. Uh, he's my grandfather. His dad passed away at an early age. He was probably just finished elementary school, never got to high school really, and he had to support the family and to support that business. And he was like an early frequent traveler, if there was such a thing from a mobility perspective. But what that meant in real life was he was delivering eggs to the province because that's how they do their stuff. And eventually he moved to other parts of mobility industry because he worked at a gasoline station. That's again one opportunity to the next led him to understand, doing some small shops, trade stuff, auto supply, doing that, and then fast forward to when we were a family. I was uh, early elementary or maybe kindergarten school. I remember this. Uh, Again, at that point, all of us were still Chinese nationals living in Manila. It was martial law period. There was a lot of restriction for families in terms of business, what you can own, where you can go, school, etc. A lot of controls, a lot of restriction. It wasn't easy for foreign nationals at that time. Uh, and I remember going through, again, my dad had to go through court because the immigration advice he got from his lawyer at the time was there's a faster way for you to get naturalized. And it's unlike any other immigration advice that you've probably given Hiba, was he had to be adopted by a local family for him to be naturalized, and immediately all of us siblings and my mom were naturalized, and that's why I was given a name that doesn't match the face. Uh, then that was my change from Chinese national to being Philippine national, and I was, lived in Manila, grew up in Manila, studied in Manila, but again, all my life we were just minority, Chinese national in the Philippines. So you know that going through school, you know that because of some of the opportunities that were a little bit different, friends, again, how you're treated, etc., a little bit different. There's some, of course, but again, you try to focus on the privileges maybe. You try to interpret it that way. I didn't know that growing up, but looking back, that's probably how I reflected that. And then work was good. And then I had opportunities all across, again, my Intel 13 years to do a lot of stuff across the region, representing the region, be able to do a lot of those, multiple years. I'd be spending over half the year doing business trips all over the region. And then HP gave me the opportunity to move from Manila to Singapore, and again, could spend another time there, but it was amazing. I was basically given the opportunity to write my job description. I was given the opportunity to be succession to the PA director for the region, and it was a lot of fun. It was life changing. Again, being able to move my family over for a long time, for about 8 months, I was split with my family. I would go home every 2 weeks because I was telling myself, this couldn't be real. This is too good. Um, that experience, that opportunity is too good, unbelievable. And then with more time, I was looking, this will probably stick. They would probably not be sending me home. So my wife and again became untenable. So my wife and daughter came over at a time when my daughter was barely in the first grade. And what that led to the last 12, 13 years I've been here was, again, access to better education for her. Living in Manila was very different. Again, third world, very appreciative, very grateful, but it also represents some difference in terms of risk based on the profile that you have. There are stuff that we've taken for granted from a safety perspective, peace and order stuff that weren't present in Singapore. All of a sudden, you feel a lot free and safe. You don't worry about being out at night. You don't worry about public transport. You don't worry about a lot of stuff. And then my daughter started to gain access to education that was, I'd like to think, better in terms of what she could have had, and access to, again, multinational, multilingual education, classmates, friends, and you always worry about how they will adjust, but adjustments for her was so natural. And for me, that's another realization in terms of the value that we bring from our job one mobility perspective. Again, when done well, when done right, we move people, it changes the trajectory of their career. Same thing, if I were in Manila, I would not have access to some of the roles I had access to when I was in Singapore to be global head, anything. That wasn't possible in Manila. People dream of that. You sometimes couldn't even aspire for that if you don't have role models. It doesn't happen. But when I was in Singapore, doors opened, and then again, mobility can also change your life for the better. And again, if you're lucky enough, as I have been, then it allows you to impact the next generation. And that's what I'm seeing with my daughter, what's possible for her. And similar to the stories that I've heard of you, it's again, she's starting her journey through law school and being able to do that from here, being able to have access to the base school, UN, model UN stuff, all of those opportunities available here, accessible from here, just amazing. And that's why, again, I applaud a lot of the people we get to work with in our ecosystem, because whether they know it or not, directly or indirectly, all of us, all of you watching us right now, you are in the business of bringing people to closer to their dreams, to making what was impossible a little bit more probable because of what we get to do every day. And that's the long and short of my journey. Thank you.
So you touched on a few things that I think are critically important. So and this is why I think that there's such a significant overlap with the concept of DEI and global mobility as an industry, right? So let's say, for example, we're looking at any industry objectively. Perhaps it was less diverse. And so DEI, basically the conversations surrounding those principles were about how do we make this industry more diverse, right? But when you look at global mobility as an industry, it is built on diversity. It is built on the idea, the notion that you're taking people from one place to another place, right? Taking people who are not necessarily going to work or live or be study in their country of birth, which is in and of itself one way of looking at diversity, which is why I think that it's really, really important for this industry to look at the principles of DEI from a little bit more of like a specialized lens, if you will. And, you know, if you don't mind, I'll share a little bit, you know, of my story with you. So I am the granddaughter and child of refugees, and then also the daughter of immigrants, you know. In the case of my father, you know, refugee and immigrant, right? And then the grandchild of refugees on both sides. Born and raised in the United States, education became the great equalizer for me, irrespective of either, you know, the difference in economic situation between myself and my peers, irrespective of the economic situation of my family, irrespective of perhaps what I now know to be intergenerational trauma. All of a sudden I had this education which put me on a level playing field with people from a wide range of backgrounds, right? And that was a game changer for me and one of the most valuable things in my experience. Definitely encourage your daughter to continue her journey in law school. What I did find to be very, very eye-opening was after obtaining that education, entering the industry, right? All of a sudden, I was back in a situation where some people are being treated a teeny bit differently than how other people are being treated, or some people seem to be advancing faster. Some people seem to be heard a little bit more. So I was wondering if in your very, very, I think, global and international career, because I think that, you know, being based in Singapore and prior to that, the Philippines, you've been able to establish a recognition and a presence in several different countries, whether that was ever an experience that you had in your career and journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those are very real, and those are stuff that people don't talk about,
Yeah,
but they experience. It can be, and I've seen different facets of that. So it can be even in the role that I had the right title, I had the right logo, but when I would roam around trade shows, those halls, those different booths, and suppliers trying, they usually reach out to you when you walk around those halls. They don't reach out to me, and again, for whatever reason. But if I would, again, and I figured it out a little bit, so I started going around those halls with somebody who reports to me who looks more similar to them, Caucasian, etc., etc.
really,
I'd be with them, and then I'll get the attention of those suppliers. And sometimes I'd be there, I'm waiting for their attention, I'm trying to get to know them because I have serious intent when I go in. I want to build a relationship, I want to understand what they're offering because I've had a lot of good successful relationships in doing that. But I noticed that this I noticed it that way. You notice it in many different ways. When I was uh, at Intel, and again, people you tend to think good intentions, all of that. When people would start a conversation with me about knowing some other Filipino working as domestic helper, they tell me, I know somebody working as a nurse. Okay, I probably know them, but I very likely do not. But good icebreaker. I don't know if that's a welcome icebreaker anymore, but people tend to do that and then can be offended. Or at times when again, this happened to us when we moved there. Again, wherever I was in my life, I would always feel like a minority. When I was in Manila, I was Chinese in the Philippines. When I was in Singapore, I'm a Filipino in Singapore. And I'd be in some furniture shop. I remember this. I remember this until now. Uh, some locals, and then tell me because I was with others Filipinos as well. Will this bed be okay with my domestic helper? I don't know. We lied. I was asked that question. Hated it. again, and people are who they are, their upbringing, views of society, etc. And then at work, it gave me a different perspective. But again, maybe it's because of what I've observed. I'll start with my why. Uh, Again, you try to do the best you can. And for me, my motivation was always, how can I make my daughter proud? And for me, that's big motivation. And then the other part is, how do I make sure that I get to do for all of the sacrifice my dad, went through, that whatever I'm doing, however I'm doing it, I can never give up. I can never complain to make all of those sacrifices worth it. So he'd work holidays, he'd work, all the time, all the time. So again, at work, in multicultural environment, and I've always, and then maybe it's more me, I've always tried to be productive with my insecurity. I've always thought, okay, they placed me in a global, head of mobility role. But I've always thought that somebody can replace me, somebody near shore, somebody in the US can replace me. My leaders are based in the US. We're a US based headquartered company. Somebody can always replace me. And that motivated me. Again, I cannot work the same way as my peers. I have to do more. I cannot complain. You have to, you have to be extraordinary. You cannot be average. And I probably told myself that over and over. You don't complain about the hours. You don't complain about night meetings. I take calls until 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's okay. You start Monday, you end Friday night, Saturday, and that's fine. You can't complain because yeah, you just have to. Because people are not. They can be kind, they can be nice with words, but in action, you just cannot, and you cannot give them any reason uh, to treat you any less, any different, and you have to always, yeah, and that's what I've convinced myself over the years, for better, for worse. And yeah, because of, again, going through all of these, it's there, you don't call it out, but you go back to your defenses and focus on, if you're lucky enough, you get to focus on offense a little bit, but you try to defend and you try to protect yourself by doing a lot of these a little bit more.
So how do you keep that from like burning you out and just like wearing down your spirit, because one of the things that I think I can relate to is this feeling of working twice as hard to seemingly get half as much, right? And to your point, don't complain, make sure that you're always working hard. I genuinely believe that people are not malicious, but sometimes it takes a long time for certain implicit biases to be eliminated and for systems to change. And in a sense where some of the I would by no means say like the first generation are pioneers, but like the change is happening, it's happening slowly, it's happening gradually, right? But what I found is even after so many years, sometimes I feel like despite the years, the tenure, the experience, I have to prove myself again. You know, how do you if you experience that, how do you prevent that from just wearing you down though?
And that's why I started with my why, for all of these,
Yeah.
to be, I have to do well, to make my daughter proud, to make sacrifice my parents went through, to be worth it. So you cannot give up, you cannot quit, you cannot, for whatever reason, you have to keep on, and you try to focus on the good. You try to be, again, as much as I can, there are bad days, but you try to be a better role model than the leaders around you, than the examples maybe you've seen. You try to find the good and you try to be better. You try to set that example by the actions, that not calling the attention, but try to lead by the example. So trying to be a better leader, trying to be a better teammate, being more inclusive, being able to invite others to speak up, being able to, again, you're in a multicultural diverse team, being able to be that example for the broader team, without always calling out a minority, but being able to do it for me in a right way that invites, again, that encourages others. And again, because I have that tendency of layering some of these. It's like, that's why that's like the last dance, Michael Jordan. he used every slight, whether real or not, as a motivation. So I've tried, again, not to that extent, but I've tried to do the same. When you feel like you've been overlooked, whether it's for an industry role, for an election in the industry, for some whatever role or whatever opportunity that you didn't get, you try to use that. I tried to use that to be a motivation. So going back to the years before I was chair elect, I actually lost a few times. And I tried to really learn from that, try to build the right relationships, and try to figure out what can I do so this thing doesn't have power over me. So go back to focus on mission. What can I do to be able to live, the advocacy, the mission, without falling for that vote or asking for that? Because when people see that connection, it looks, not authentic. But if you keep doing the right thing, then again, leading by the examples of your action, then things will happen. Things will fall into place. You build credibility, integrity, all of the other stuff that transcends, again, color, race, everything else. Not easy, and it's a longer term. It's longer term. It takes a while.
And also, I think it's important to acknowledge that this experience, so right now what we're doing is we're talking about our experiences as, people of color. Okay, so in my case, I'm talking about my experience as a minority in the United States. Your experiences are somewhat different in that you are an ethnic minority in a country other than the United States, right? And so I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that the concept of somebody feeling like they're experiencing certain challenges in their professional life doesn't necessarily mean that you are like an Asian or something like that. Like, it could very well mean somebody from a different background going to another country abroad, because at the end of the day, this is global mobility, right? And I was wondering if you had ever in your time had an opportunity to observe somebody who would not necessarily be thought of as a minority, or somebody who would not necessarily be thought of as somebody who perhaps is from like a Caucasian background going to like another country and experiencing something that's very, very kind of analogous to maybe somebody coming from another country, entering the United States and working, right? Because at the end of the day, the struggles could be the same.
Absolutely, and it could be any of
It could
these,
be,
right?
yeah.
For as long as you're not part of a class, then right, whether it's race, gender, or anything, then for me that's where it applies. And I'll use specific examples of, again, leading by the examples of your action, what we are in control of, focusing on that, and hopefully your example, creates a little bit of a ripple effect. Then you try to build momentum and be an example, then others will follow. So specific to the role, specific to being in mobility. So very early on, I knew this was an advocacy. You try to talk about it, not, but talk is cheap. At the end of the day, it's about the actions that we take. So I was very clear at the onset to be able to help, again, in my program. If everything else is equal or minimal differences, I want to be able to give, again, women-led small business, women-led, women-owned companies, etc. Give them a break, give them a chance, because it's really hard for a lot of people. So we started doing that. I remember being able to put a lot of support towards a boutique like DSP company in the Bay Area, women-led, women-owned, very small company, boutique like, give them an opportunity with our program. And to the extent that they could scale and accommodate our volume, we kept giving them uh, volume. And then we kept looking at their scores and we kept encouraging them. When we started to move our headquarters and a lot of moves going into Texas, we invited them. Do you want to set up shop in Texas? We'll be, we will commit, part of our business to you, and things like that happens. And when you get to talk about your success story, you get to bring in other clients for them, and hopefully you start to create that change for others and for them, the example that they set for other entrepreneurs. Same thing with, again, my story when we tried to put in temp living providers. I engaged with again, during the pandemic, I was noticing BV as an example, show up here and there. I didn't know the company, and then an introduction led to, okay, let's try you out in a simple location. If you make that happen, pull that off, we'll give you another location. We'll give you another location. Again, one success led to another, whether it's Ukraine crisis, exiting Ukraine, exiting Russia, Kazakhstan, etc., and then giving them India, giving them US. They've earned it every step of the way, but it only takes an opportunity that we are in control of to give somebody a break. You don't need to go through a full-blown RFP. You don't need to commit exclusivity, but giving somebody a break, minority, women-led, women-owned, small company. I think we got involved at a time when they were only 20 plus employees. They're probably over 100 right now, and a lot of other bigger logos came in. But we were the first, similar to many other stories. Again, figuring out what you are in control of, not waiting for a big change, a big moment to happen, but being able to figure out what you're in control of. How can I make this change that, again, action that reflects advocacy and mission, doing good, being good? You can do that. Everybody can do that. We are in roles where we can do that, advocate for somebody else. And that's how we hopefully can start to break the cycle, make this, whatever, wherever we are, wherever we operate it, a better place. So the next generation, my daughter's generation, will not have as much of a difficult time, adversity when they have to come in. And hopefully she gets to be an immigration lawyer similar to you.
I hope so too. So I'll tell you, I remember this very, very clearly. There was this moment, it was back in 2018, um, that basically served to reiterate to me that, you know what, even after nearly, a decade of practicing law and, being somewhat, of a tenured professional, as a woman of color in particular, uh, what I was saying, sometimes it felt like, it wasn't carrying the same weight, or, it wasn't quite being heard. And we already, touched on this earlier in the conversation. But the reason I bring it up again is because there was a moment and I felt like I experienced that, and I took that and I channeled it into the creation of the Women in the Law group internally within my own company. And it's very, very informal, very, very grassroots. But basically, the idea is to feature women who have made, progress in their careers in the legal profession, and they simply come internally within the firm and just tell their story, right? And the reason that I did this is because inevitably, with every single session, one of our guest speakers says something that one of the female employees within the firm relates to, right? And I will usually get like a message offline after the fact, and they'll be like, oh, you know what, I really liked how she said that she had to work on, not apologizing all the time, because I feel like that's a weakness that I have. I feel like I'm apologizing all the time. Very small example. The reason that I share this is because in the very, very kind of like wide and broad world of advocacy and mentorship, this was the area where I felt like I found my passion and where I could make the most impact, which is focus more on the people who are feeling the effects of maybe some of this implicit bias, and kind of coach them, right? But again, mentorship and advocacy is a very, very broad topic. And so I was curious, other than the examples that you listed about giving opportunities to, women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses and whatnot, whether there were any examples of how you engaged in more one-on-one mentorship, or what area of advocacy and mentorship speaks to you the most?
Absolutely. And again, something that I don't brag about, I don't publish, I don't share. And intentionally, I tell some of the people I get to mentor, I get coach, do not post, do not thank me, do not do all of these. Again, part of the chat that you want this to be authentic, you want this to be selfless. So different moments in my life, but again, the pandemic years were for me one of the darkest for a lot of people. A lot of joblessness, employment insecurity, happening. A lot of people just going through some tough times, and I was going through some some challenging times as well in terms of figuring out who I am in the industry, in our ecosystem, in the global community, because I've been displaced a little bit, in 2020, with VRC and figuring out who I want to be. So I started reaching out to people who have positivity. I've met a lot of people with a lot of positivity, reaching out, trying to be that again person behind the scenes. How can I support you? How can I help you? I started going grassroots, going to Australia, going to locations that do not have access to leaders like you, like us, uh, for whatever reason. So I started spending time there. Started spending time in other locations in Prague, in locations that do not get a lot of peace, and trying to find relationships and leaders you can support, suppliers you can support, people who just need an encouragement. So that happened, and I started even a program. Well, I'm calling it a program now, but it started with I'm asking like three different people who are of influence, telling them to nominate people I can coach, and the relationship like for 3 months. If you like me, and after 3 months it's working for you, let's extend. If not, then thank you. I'll find the next one. I'll find the next one, and because of that, I actually built a good network. People who are tech leaders in some small RMC companies, analytics leaders in some RMC company that moved on to different roles. Somebody who wasn't head of a program then, but I remember her. She was displaced. She was laid off by one of the big four, and she was 6 months pregnant. So I had to reach out, do some coaching, mentoring. Really, it was happening, unthinkable. And she lost her job. She was in Australia, and then tried to figure out opportunities for her. Gave her a gig, and that gig led to another gig, and then she gave birth. And then when she was ready, I told her, reach out. And then she got into another contract with a big multinational company, and then they moved her over to EMEA, and now she's the global head of a program. I've had a lot of that relations. People during the pandemic who said, I'm taking a break because this is too much for me, everything else going on, young children, all of that. When you're ready to come back, even if you've spent all of your years in immigration, let me give you, let's do something together. So we started giving her opportunities because she wanted to go broaden her horizon, broaden the opportunities. She was immigration lawyer all her life and doing all of that for one of the big firms. And then when she got involved with us, so, okay, you want to experience other stuff? You help us with the domestic moves over to Texas. Help us with Ukraine outbound. Help us with something else. Manage something else, and that opportunity led to other opportunities, and now she's the global head of immigration for one of the biggest Fortune 100 companies. So I built a lot of that relationship. It's very fulfilling, and I'm no longer, mobility is no longer my job one, but again, because of mobility, and the why of mobility has been core to my why: diversity, minority, going through the journey, making an impact somebody's life, somebody's career. That's what keeps me connected with mobility. I still have that good small circle of people that I get to advocate for and support, whether suppliers or individuals, independents, people who are in between gigs right now. Because the community is hurting. There's a lot of people who lost their jobs because the market is shrinking. Jobs are shrinking. It's not what they used to be. Corporate jobs are being outsourced to suppliers, and suppliers are shrinking in terms of their footprint as well. So there's a lot of people in need of help. Again, so my encouragement for everybody: there's a lot you can do, a lot you can control if you are authentic to what you say you are, who you say you want to be, who say you are. There's a lot of people in need of an encouragement. Uh, Again, diversity and all of that, but people at large, the community is hurting. There's a lot we can do, a lot we can control.
So you actually ended up saying exactly what was my thought process for even why this video series was created. There are a lot of people hurting. There are economic reasons for that, right? Whether it's on the supplier side, whether it's on the company side. But this is just my observation, but my observation was as a result of the fact that there were so many other economic issues that took precedence. There were other conversations, one of which was around supporting DEI initiatives that took a little bit of a back burner. And then I found that I was not alone in that observation, because there are some folks who have said something similar, whether it's like an article, in a publication or something like that. And so what I wanted to ask you was what your observation was in terms of the priority given to certain, DEI initiatives and measures or support of overall like DEI, programs, whether you've seen that change. And then the second part of the question is, what do you think we as an industry should be doing to ensure that it doesn't get put on the back burner?
For me, most important, again, put a lot of premium in terms of authenticity and action.
Yeah.
Most important. There was a period in time where there were too much lip service on diversity. It's the same lip service that ESG is probably getting right now. All of that stuff, being able to measure, being able to report something important. But at the end of the day, for me, commitment that transcends, what's fad and what's real is authenticity of the individual action to purpose, action to mission. That's what needs to stay there, whether you get to brag about it or not. For me, I prefer to not, for it to be really selfless and authentic. But at some point, you acknowledge that you need to be able to spotlight all of these examples to be able to encourage others that it doesn't require a big corporate mandate, a big decision for somebody else to take action, to make a decision, to make an investment before you can do something. It shouldn't require that. And people need to know what they're in control of. And that's the message I want us, and what I appreciate about your platform is, again, the topic's important, the subject's important, the focus is important, but at some point we need to bring it home and focus on what we can do, what's actionable, what I'm in control of. And then that becomes, for me, the spark that's needed for all of these to gain momentum that doesn't stop during good times and bad times. Because for me, that's when all of these are harmed more, right? During good times, 2021, great resignation, a lot of investment over hiring. During good times, it's easy to be successful. But when companies start to be careful about spending and cash flow, etc., then all of these start to go out the window and start to be deprioritized. And for me, that's worse. Don't start it if you can sustain it, because then you lose credibility and momentum when you try to restart this. Then it becomes employer branding. Then you lose authenticity and credibility in front of your audience.
So, Kerwin, final question. Let's say, for example, you in some professional situation spot a younger professional who reminds you very much of yourself when you were starting out your career. What would you say to that person if you observe that person struggling with maybe some of the challenges that you faced early in your career?
Well, I grew up and I specialize right now in tough love. Uh, that's what my leaders have done. The most successful leaders I've had have done for me, and that's what I specialize in doing with. Yeah. So hard realities, keeping people centered on what's your goal and what are you willing to be able to get there, and to be able to impose upon them, hopefully, a reflection, a realization at some point, that you're doing this not just for yourself. And that's another obligation that I know that I used to put more pressure on myself. Why you cannot give up. That's why you cannot stop doing good, even if nobody's noticing. That I cannot mess up. I cannot give a bad experience to my customers and stakeholders, because if I mess up, then it doesn't just defeat me. It discourages them from hiring the next Chinese national, Philippine national into that global head role, and be comfortable in having that role sit outside of headquarters multiple time zones away. I put pressure on myself because it works. If I mess up, I'm taking opportunities away for a lot of people I don't even know right now. And if I'm successful, they will not know me, but I don't want to carry that burden of knowing that I discourage somebody from doing. So in the same way that, again, you try to do well, you try to encourage others, you try to support them, you try to advocate for them, because you know when you get to do that at some point in my lifetime or beyond my lifetime, for my daughter and her family and her next generation, it will hopefully be easier for them, that they would not have to go through what the struggles that you went through, what I heard from you today, what my parents went through, that hopefully we get to make that contribution to the next generation. Whether they know it came from us or not doesn't matter. We just want to leave this place better than what we got, how it was when we got here.
Well, as always, it was an absolute pleasure and an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing your story. And thank you for being such an inspiring leader in the industry.
Thank you. Let's please keep having these conversations with so many others. We are never short of conversations like this. And I know I've not opened up like this to any other platform as much as I've done this. Only with you. I trust you. I admire you. I appreciate what you stand for, what you represent. And I will keep cheering you on. You're somebody that I admire. I really want this to be successful. Congratulations on doing this and grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, Hip.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That was very, very sweet. You just made my whole week. Thank you so much, Kerwin.